blueprint for growing cities where we'll connect the dots between cities around the world, looking for local solutions to global challenges. And we are delighted to be joined for this conversation by Maria Ayalova. She promotes smart urban design, and she directs the global programs at the Council on International Educational Exchange, or CIEE, which teaches urban planners an interdisciplinary approach to city building. And she's also co-founder of the design group Terraform 1, focused on the intersection of ecology and architecture. Everybody here actually has long biographies, so give me one more minute and I'll explain who else we have here. Gary Handel is president of Handel Architects. You could be familiar with his work, the renovation of the historic Filene's department store building in Boston, the ongoing renovation of Pier 57 on the Hudson, and soon the Cornell Tech residences on Roosevelt Island, when it opens, will be one of the greenest high-rises in the world. And finally, Sharon Pinkerton, head of legislative and regulatory policy at Airlines for America, overseeing the global basket of measures, a commitment by airlines to decrease their environmental footprint around the globe, with air travel projected to double in the next 20 years, which we heard about earlier this morning. So thank you all, and Steve.
Thank you very much. You know, normally I change my socks when I go between two different things so I can get, just show as a little break or different, but I didn't have time. Thank you very much, Margaret. Gary, you're a Cornell grad. Mm-hmm. You're doing the Cornell residences. Any connection?
Yeah, I worked really hard to get that job, as I think did every architectural alum that ever graduated from Cornell.
Yeah, they all did that. They were all out there, so
everyone wanted that.
So tell us, how's that building going? And I want to mention it because it was featured in a great article in the Atlantic called "The Height of Efficiency: Cornell is building one of the greenest high-rises in the world." First, tell us why it's one of the greenest high-rises and how you got in this, and what's the status of it right now.
Sure. Actually, if you could cue up slide 3 for that. So go to 3. That's 1, 2, 3. So we'll work backwards here.
Okay, great.
So the
that
Cornell,
proves we didn't coordinate.
Right. So this will be the residential building that's part of the Cornell Tech campus, which is really an initiative to bring an applied sciences campus to New York City. This will be the largest and the tallest and largest passive house project ever built in the world. So passive house is a very rigorous standard that will dramatically reduce energy utilization in buildings. So basically this building is designed to basically reduce its energy consumption by 73% measured against a building of similar size. So that basically the impact of that is huge. Based if you listen to what Hilda said at the last panel about the amount of energy that's consumed by buildings. So this, if it was applied universally across the building stock in New York City, it would lead to about a 60% reduction in overall energy use in the city and about a 55% reduction in greenhouse gases.
What is the cost of this thing compared to a naughty building?
So what's really interesting is we're using relatively standard off-the-shelf technology, but in an innovative way. So basically the cost premium for this building is about 10%, and with the
10% more.
10% more, and then with the projected energy savings, depending on the cost of energy at the time, it might have a 7 to 12 year payback. So so it's actually it's a relatively good investment.
Wow, now Maria, you work in this business as well. Now you were a co-founder of Terraform.
Yes.
So I want you to tell. As I understand it, you're looking at anthropomorphic or structures in nature and growing them. And you had, if I find it here, this incredible tweet called "Hydromembrane Farming and Physical Computing!" ! You were showing off what someone had done. So what in the heck does that mean? And why are you on stage?
Well, at Terraform 1, what we set to do is to really project far into the future. We combine design and science in a single curriculum and learn from scientists that in order to solve the problems that we're facing today, you need to really think 100 years ahead, 200 years ahead. So, but we start with technologies that exist today, that are under development today, and then we project them into the future. So this hydromembrane, it's a new way of farming and a very thin membrane where you can provide all the nutrients, and then you can apply that membrane to a surface of a building and grow food. And we experimented with that this summer with our research fellows.
Gary, does any of this jive for you in your building, or is it just too far out?
No, again, I think the technology will help us solve these problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically advances in science will basically be implemented in buildings and will definitely solve problems. I do another lecture which is called Glass Without Guilt, ? Which basically talks about using the building surface as a way to actually generate energy to create net positive energy generating buildings. So I think the climate forum in Paris basically identified the technology sector as being essential to really dealing with the huge problems that we face.
So it's fascinating because, Maria, I did go in deeply, and I also read a big profile of Terraform and went and I looked at about 6 months of your tweets and the buildings you've toured. And it is a fascinating world that when you look at the Broad, you took a picture and talked about light, you talked about these different composites. And I know that you're taking a very, very long look at design and what could be done. We can all live in Swiss Family Robinson like tree homes in the future. But I'm interested in whether or not you're dealing with what I would call a lot of the flat Earth crowd, that you have a big problem convincing people of the seriousness of what your firm and your group is doing.
Well, when we first started with Terraform 1, that was now 10 years ago, I don't think people took us seriously. We were called the futurists or utopian architecture. But that has changed because now a lot of these technologies that were new 10 years ago, and we drew these images of future cities, now they're becoming a reality. There are people who grow food on the surface of buildings and generate energy from building facades and daylighting of creeks. It's something that is happening around cities around the world. So today we feel that we have moved, we are invited to be on the table. We are here at this panel talking to other
Well, this is
architects.
taking me to Sharon. Sharon, I spend an enormous amount of time in airports and on airplanes, and I'm just wondering what you think you can learn from terraforming, airports, or maybe you're already doing it.
Plenty, I'm sure, but as I think was mentioned here earlier, we do have a very collaborative relationship with airports and manufacturers, I'll say, with United Technologies. Airlines have to work with the entire family of aviation to reach our goals. So with United Technologies, their turbofan engine has been incredible in helping us reach our fuel efficiency goals. So aviation's unique. We fly at 30,000 feet, so we have to be very careful, I'll say, in terms of making sure that we achieve our safety and security goals. But we've got a great track record since 1978.
So you cover just the airlines, right?
Yes.
You don't look at private flights.
No, we don't.
Much.
That's true. But again, the aviation community itself, manufacture commercial airplanes, but they also manufacture private airplanes, et cetera. So it's a symbiotic relationship.
Sharon, one of the interesting things with the last panel is we had someone from the mayor's office, an NGO, and someone from the health world in academia, and you see a kind of coalition building. And I'm interested in your world of aviation and thinking ahead about what it needs. Are regulators positive parts of that process, or do they suck?
No, there's one thing that we've learned.
I mean, and I don't mean suck in the sense, do they get what you're trying to go when you talk about goals? My sense in aviation is it's not the same thing as cities greening themselves yet, but tell me where I'm wrong.
No, absolutely. We've been able to accomplish agreeing just recently through ICAO, that's the International Civil Aviation Organization, on a CO2 standard for engines. That wouldn't have happened without EPA and the FAA at the table. So as we've come together, whether it's a CO2 standard, a CO standard, NOx standards, I mean, we have a history of reaching agreement, but it can only be done through collaboration with the regulator and industry working together, because our industry is so unique. I mean, it is truly, our tagline is "We connect the world." We are truly global, And it won't work to have, one CO2 standard in one country and a different one in another country. And the same thing with our climate change goals as well.
What is the biggest hurdle for your members right now in achieving your goals? What are the things that would be uneven or the biggest gap in airlines and I guess the infrastructure surrounding airlines from being more green?
Yeah, well, it's a difficult question because we've been working now. We set our climate change goals, which is carbon neutral growth from 2020, and efficiency goals from here until 2020. So that was a major accomplishment to get both the regulator, but to get the regulator and industry working toward the same goals. But we've all agreed to get there. It's got to be a combination of technology, operations, and infrastructure. There's a lot there I can explore about how governments are doing or not doing so well in achieving those things. And then, so I would say there are some major obstacles there with technology and infrastructure. In your cars you have GPS, which means you can try to go in the most direct path to get where you're going. That's not how you fly. You fly over ground-based waypoints. You fly in a zigzag. It's incredibly inefficient. So we've been working with the federal government to try to get what we're calling next gen, or GPS, to basically enable flights to fly in a straight line. I mean, this will result in it's estimated to be anywhere from 10 to 12% emission savings. But I would say that is one of the major obstacles to us getting to where we want to go. There's a lot more. But
Gary, let's jump from the planes to the ground again. One of the other things I liked about your profile is it wasn't just about this nifty building you're building, because it looks very avant-garde, fascinating, and the technology is interesting, but most of the world's not built that way. And we're not built because it's already built. And I'm interested in your work in changing the face of carbon emissions in buildings that already exist, and how you go through. I don't know where the New York Public Library is, a gorgeous building, but how would you save this place?
It's interesting. We're actually part of a peer review panel that looked at
this building,
the future expansion of this project. I think one of the interesting things about existing buildings is just by saving them, you're basically reducing the carbon footprint of maintaining a space. If you look at the embodied energy that is in a building like this compared to demolishing it and putting something up, it's an exponential factor. And if you can actually take this building and bring it up to a next-gen standard, you have a double win.
So that's inside cities, but is that true? One of the other phenomena we see in the United States anyway, maybe the world is just urban sprawl, and buildings go up quickly, maybe they come down, or maybe they get abandoned. How do you deal with the non-sexy parts of the building world out there in making them more compliant?
Well, I'd like to pull up my first slide now, just because it's actually really interesting. Just because if this is really a problem statement for, I think, what's really going on today. If you look at that graph, basically it shows the bottom line is really carbon emissions for the developed world, and then basically the upper portion is projected carbon footprint for the developing world. And basically, if you look at 2040, we reach the point of what's the tipping point, which is the point of no return, at which point the climate change will be irreversible. And if you look at that, 90% of the projected growth in carbon output is in the developing world. So it's really about first world making room.
Can I just ask you questions here, just
sure.
clear? Wyoming?
Exactly. So if you look at cities are the solution or at least the scaffold for the solution to the problem. If you look at
states are bad.
Well, if you look at Wyoming, basically in terms of of its energy utilization compared to
BTUs a person.
Yeah,
compared to the inefficiency of Wyoming compared to the efficiency of cities.
Just in terms of the amount of energy utilized by a person in each of those places is radical. So basically, the idea I think we should, again, the sprawl is the enemy. Those, it's unsustainable in so many ways. And basically, the single worst thing we could do is export sprawl. So because the big problem that we have is actually, really making room for the developing nations by reducing our carbon output, and then finding a template for developing nations that actually allow people to have a better standard of life in those countries without destroying the planet.
So this is a very, very compelling slide, because what it also tells you is that rich nations and rich cities can do this stuff better than poor nations and poor cities. And your answer is a kind of techno-socialism, as I understand it. Maybe I'm wrong. But sort of exporting, giving them what they need to leapfrog so they don't go through that process. And I hear this a lot, and I'm just wondering, does that equation really work? Because, I mean, these graphs are telling you where trends are going. To bend that curve would take a massive impact, right? So doesn't this mean we're cooked no matter what we do?
Slide 2. Yeah, so I think the only way to make it work is two things, right? We actually have to reduce the amount of energy that's generated using fossil fuels, because that basically gives us more room to play, and then we have to figure out ways to do radically more with radically less. And if you look at, these are things that are being done. So this is actually showing that we can do much, much better. That basically if you look at a standard incandescent light versus an LED, if you look at the 1950s fleet to basically what a Tesla can do, Prius is at 50 to 54 miles per gallon, so basically huge savings. You could do waterless toilets, or even the standard toilet that you would buy and have to use in New York City is a 1.6 gallon flush. So it's already 300% better. And we talked a little bit about what can be achieved in the building sector. If all of this is done, plus the Manhattan Project that we really need, that Bill Gates outlined in terms of really finding new technological solutions to these things, we can bend that curve. We have to do it. We have to implement it. I think that's why the regulatory frame is so important, because people tend to be a little bit lazy. I think everyone's well-meaning, but there's just a lot of inertia that needs to be overcome in order to bend that graph in time.
Maria, how are you going to fix this problem? I mean, because I want to put it in, it's nice to put it in a global dimension. If I go to Sao Paulo, Brazil, or I go to Mumbai, India, I go to places where this kind of leap is not easy. What does your thinking bring to this global challenge? Because I know you think in a global frame.
Well, my idea is to educate these future professionals and call them global citizens. And they're educated to examine the impact of human actions on the global environment, and then explore both strategies and solutions to overcome these challenges that we're facing today. So the global citizens will possess this powerful mixture of interdisciplinary academic viewpoints, global visions, but then applied local knowledge. And so they can go and help communities around the world overcome the barriers to their sustainable goal.
You're a real optimist.
I am.
Yeah. Do you see downsides in that getting an educated crowd globally around there may not be enough?
Well, I believe in knowledge spillover. So we have to start with educating people who know how to deal locally and bring knowledge. And then by bringing that there, that these ideas will grow. And I've seen that already happening. And even like some of the ideas of Terraform 1 are now spreading around the world. And now my students who are coming to study on the CIE global programs are returning, going back to Cape Town to start NGOs there to continue that spillover of knowledge.
Gary, Sharon, when you look at the global system as well, and you look at what's out there, and we have our friend from Oslo, are there practitioners out there? Are there models that you say, wow, that's really cool, that's something the United States can learn from? I think sometimes people like you are very enlightened, but I think most of us are not, particularly myself, that what are our blind spots, what good practices are others doing outside this country that we ought to be paying more attention to?
Go ahead.
But I think focusing on renewables, I think, is super critical. And I think other countries are a little bit ahead of us in doing a better job. Other countries are doing, especially the Northern European countries, are doing a better job with waste management and actually, like turning, utilizing.
Did you read this weird thing about Denmark and trash?
Yeah. Is that amazing?
Yeah, I mean, Denmark got so efficient that its system now needs to import trash. Is that right?
Yeah. So they burn trash in order to generate energy, and they don't have enough of it because they've reduced their waste stream. What an amazing thing, right? So
that's a good thing in your book.
Yeah, it's amazing. So they can take New York City's trash. They can take Wyoming's trash.
Yeah. Interesting. Sharon,
I'd agree with that observation. United was the first commercial airline to run a commercial flight using a mix of sustainable aviation fuels a couple of years ago.
United was?
Yes, and from Houston to Chicago. Alaska has done commercial flights as well. So we've got 3 carriers, FedEx, Alaska, and United, who have offtake agreements with different alternative aviation fuel producers in this country. But I would say folks like BA.
Boeing, I know, developed a plane was a biomass fuel plane. Is that just greenwashing, or is that real?
No. Absolutely. We have what we call the Commercial Aviation Alternative Fuel Institute, which is a public-private partnership. Boeing's a part of it. We've worked very closely with Boeing and the U.S. Department of Agriculture in what we call Farm to Fly, a program where
Farm to Fly,
where we are, working closely again with.
That's the coolest thing I've heard all morning.
Good. Look it up.
Yeah.
We're working closely with the Defense Logistics Agency. You've heard of the Great Green Fleet that the Navy's doing. So we've got a great partnership on alternative fuels going here. But I do feel like BA and the Europeans have paved the way for us a little bit on that.
I want to go to the audience in a moment, but again, we are sitting in New York City, and we had a panel earlier looking at this. You're building in the Cornell campus on Roosevelt Island. When you think out 20 years ahead, and your building has set this new standard of, and as I understand it, you're putting a wrap around it, and it sounds. I mean, I don't know if it is a healthy building like Joe Allen would want, but it sounds like a healthy building. What kinds of repercussions do you think you'll begin to see in a city like New York from what you're doing? What kind of echo effects do you hope for?
Yes, I think I loved the panel before, and actually talking about the regulatory frame, I thought was really interesting. So I think the job of professionals is actually to sort of is to really set a super high standard, actually to do flagship projects that actually show what's possible, and then usually the regulatory frame gets set a notch below that, so that basically that it doesn't seem so hard to get to, and then basically that becomes the new standard. Then somebody else comes up with something that actually pushes, that plateau, higher, and the regulatory frame moves up, right? And I think that's happening in New York in a very, very healthy way. So I think Hilda, described that incredibly well in terms of, that basically, New York ratchets up its energy standards every couple of years in terms of what the baseline is. And so the job of people like Terraform, ourselves, basically is really to raise the bar above the regulatory standard, right? So that allows the regulatory frame then to follow behind us and ratchet that up, so that basically we move the whole pile upwards in order to try to bend that curve down to make room for all of the folks in India, China, and the rest of the world.
I want to go to the audience before I do that. I want to ask Maria. Maria, I looked at some of the things that Terraform is making, like this indoor-outdoor kind of cool, movable farm, and it runs about $10,000, or that's what it's projected to be. It's $35,000 now. Is there any way anything you make will be affordable by me?
Absolutely, because you can make it yourself.
Oh, I see. Yeah. You allow the technology to be transferred without fee?
Well, ONE stands for Open Network Ecology. So all these files are available. You can download it.
Where do we find them?
You can just send me an email. You can download it, run it through a CNC digital mill, and assemble it yourself.
That's terrific. We can get everyone's email to you, and you can do this, and we can make an impact here today, and for all of you online as well. Let me open the floor to questions. Our friend from Oslo right here to start. Let me bring you a microphone.
Thank you. So beyond being your friend from Oslo, Thank you.
You don't really have to be my friend if you don't want to.
We can have a lunch and we can find that. So I also work for Altanova. It's a sustainability consulting firm which works with its clients to advance their business using technological solutions that both this and the previous panel touched upon. And, you know, it's a very general question, which frustrates me a lot, but I feel that it's very central. And I believe a lot of the people in this audience today relate to it, because I think most of us here see the logics that are being presented. We believe them. Now, that's a challenge, though, when we go out the door here and continue working with these solutions. So it's very related to the question I had in the last panel, but I'd still like to hear what is your take on this, which is how do you make the rest of the people believe in these solutions? Because you know, is it by focusing on the numbers? Like, the slides are brilliant, very, very convincing numbers, I think. But when I go to other people and present them, they're like, oh yeah, that's great. And then they go off to their next meeting. So is it by, do you focus on the long-term profit? Right. Is it something emotional? You know, I feel it's not just a question about sales method here. And
I'm going to take it and piggyback. It's a great question of how do you build a movement? How do you take the movement viral? The things that, say, UTC or other big infrastructure, do you need society to be conscious of what's happening, one? Two, do you need them to be believers? And three, does a big discount at Home Depot help? Good.
All right, so we don't find it all that hard, you know, like, you know, because I actually think the world is changing. You know, so the client for the Cornell project is a joint venture between the Related companies and the Hudson companies. The Related is one of the biggest developers in the country. They have a commitment to sustainability, which is amazing. They have a sustainability guru, Luke Falk, on their staff, which basically pushed us on this project to basically push his boss, you know, like, and you know, and so that you know, and they're the biggest of the big. David Kramer, who sort of led the from Hudson Companies, who led it, was, you know, fearless and just basically go, we're going to do this, right? When we didn't know how, you know, like, and you know, and we sort of, you know, and he basically gave us the room to figure it, you know, to figure this out. These are people who are in business to make money, right? You know, and they believe that by doing this project, which is risky and a demonstration project and wasn't clear at the beginning that we would actually be able to be successful, that it would drive their business. And they want to. You know, basically, you know, there are very few seriously bad people, you know, in the, you know, like, you know, that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. You know, some people are scared, some people are overly cautious, but everyone kind of wants to do the right thing. So if you can show them a path, if you can actually show them that it can be done, if you can show that it can be done, you know, at a modest increase in, you know, in cost, you can almost always get buy-in. You know, and I think it's just that it's our job to push, right? You know, like, and so you know, like, and you somebody gives you. But
there's a balance, right? There's a balance between seducing people along to think this is something they can believe in and has a spiritual dimension or a holistic life dimension, and then there's the other side. And I can imagine if my good acquaintance Grover Norquist were on stage, or one of my friends in the Chinese Economic Growth Bureau who believe that they have legacy climate rights and legacy carbon rights because we all grew before they did, that you could have a very different answer to that the drivers have to come from different directions. Am I wrong? And Maria, I want you to get into this because I think you're the most closest to the guru on stage. Thoughts?
Well, there are two ways we do it. First, with propaganda, and by showing that this fantastic future that is in front of us, where you can have farm balls and all these other amazing inventions, and taking these ideas around the world and showing it in major museums and publishing it, but then also
so propaganda
and education. So
they're different.
They are. So I take students, and young American students, and take them for a semester abroad to study in Germany. And I showed them all the practices in Germany, and they see how farmers do it, and then to the high technology, how everybody believes in this sustainable future, and their life changes forever. They come back, and hopefully they'll bring these ideas back here or around the world.
Sharon, do you have thoughts on this?
I do, because I think aviation is a little bit different. I mean, what we're facing now at ICAO in that UN framework is, you touched on it a little bit. I mean, frankly, airlines are committed. We've got the goals. But we do see as, in that discussion in Montreal, some of the fast-growing countries, the developing countries, are saying, we haven't had our chance to grow. So our challenge between now and September of 2016 and then by 2020, which is coming up quickly, is it is a little bit of, we can talk about all the sexy stuff and all fuels and all of that, but it really comes down to government industry collaboration and kind of some hard work and slogging through it and being willing to collaborate and compromise to get to where we need to be.
Not to editorialize, we've got to wrap this up. I've just given the hook. But I also think the public demands it in your industry more than people think, that they expect to see progress happening. They may not be the ones to figure out the equation that works, right? But there is a public expectation that's growing.
No, that's why all of the airlines have corporate sustainability, programs and policies. But we're committed to it in and of ourselves, and part of it is, we're also driven by the economics of it. But we've made our commitments. We're solid in what our goals are going to be, and we're committed to that.
Gary, can I go to the opening?
Sure.
When is it going to be?
So it will be in about.
You were kind of reticent about that. I mean.
Yeah. So we'll be done in around open in around a year from now.
In about a year. Well, I would love to go. Give me the date.
Definitely do that.
Maybe you ought to give them a farm ball.
Absolutely.
It'd be kind of cool.
We have actually.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Sharon Pinkerton of Airlines for America, Gary Handel with Handel Architects, and Maria Ayalova of Terraform One. Thank you so much.